Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my holiday book garden. This is the third live stream of book 3 of Thousand Autumns. And it's kind of been a little bit because we haven't had a live since Wednesday, which is one more day than it usually is. So I guess it just feels a bit longer. But I hope everyone who celebrated had a good Thanksgiving and Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all of those things, because I know I, for one, probably spent way too much money, but I got a lot of good deals, I think, unless people pulled some shenanigans with the prices. But I double-checked a couple of them, so I think I got relatively a good deal. I know I definitely got a lot of gifts for family members, though, so is what it is. I wonder, did I click on the wrong one? I don't think so. I just don't see anyone popping in. I'll give it another minute. I'm going to go grab the book. Ugh. No one here tonight? I know it's Tuesday. Let me make sure the phone's off. It is not off. Oops. Okay. Well then. What was I saying? Oh, yes. So this is a very chill live stream. I will talk to myself. I will talk to my lovely chat. I will talk to the book. If that's not really your thing, that's okay. I mean, odd point to join, but no judgment. But maybe stick around. You might enjoy it. I do not own anything, only the physical copy in front of me and my time. Seven Seas and Meng Shi owns the rest. Or Qian Chu. I think, is it Qian Chu or Meng Shi? That's the author. I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't own it. I'm not sponsored. I'm just doing this for fun. And today I'm dressed as Shen Yuan because I was working on some holiday things that you will see starting on, what day? The 18th. Hello, Annika, and hello, Truffle. Do you like my very quickly improvised Shen Yuan cosplay? Holiday cosplay? I got tired of filming in long wigs that kept slipping, so we improvised. Thank you. I like them too. They're very sparkly on the video. Well, it's fun. Thank you. I already had the glasses, so it was easy. This is actually supposed to be a little mushroom wig, and then I looked at it and just couldn't style it in the way that I wanted, and I just did Meng Shi. Okay. Okay. That's the author. But yeah. I have been working my booty off to do all these. You're going to have a baker's dozen day of Fickmas. Starting the 18th all the way through to New Year's Eve. There will be a fanfic release at 6 CST under the fanfic special tab. Let me see what it's actually called. Fanfic special streams tab. One each day. And I have just gotten over the hill or over the hump with the recordings where I am more than half. I just finished 7 days out of 13. So, no pressure. Some of them are like split into two because one of them, I'm not doing another 4-hour stream. That one is going to actually be New Year's Eve one. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, I hope. I put in some silly ones. I put in some slightly more serious ones. One is vaguely Christmassy, vaguely. Like it mentions Christmas, but they're not really holiday-y-ish. They're just really good works. So I hope you'll enjoy. So yeah, it'll be that I think we'll end up finishing book. Well, I think we might actually finish book 4 before that, or no, we'll finish this one. We will finish this one, and then right after that, I believe I timed it so that it will start that Thursday, and it'll be the same one. Oh my gosh, lag? Is it lagging? Let me reset it. Hang on. Okay, hang on. Okay. I had my dad reset it, so it should be good. If not, no worries, Truffle. But yeah, so those things will be happening over the holiday season. What day does Hanukkah stuff start? Hanukkah. When does it start? December 14th through December 22nd. Yeah, no, I can't fit in more streams. I'm kind of pushing it to fit this many in, but I think I can make it work. But anyway, how's everyone's week, holiday? How is things? Did anyone have a good Thanksgiving? Did anyone have a crazy Thanksgiving? Did someone like trip and throw the turkey? Like, what's going on? I had a very chill Thanksgiving. I got the outdoor lights up. I got the indoor decorations up. I got the tree up. It was a very busy 2 days doing that. But it looks really nice. It's very festive, but not too much, like just enough. But yeah, what did people do this weekend? Hello? Is it lagging again? It's not giving me the indication that it's lagging on my end. I'm gonna see if the chat's working. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, I don't, but I found out that a couple people that I work with did, and one of them surprised me because I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you celebrated Hanukkah." No, I celebrate Christmas, but I also want to be like, I knew it was somewhere around like the 18th-ish. So if it was like 1 or 2 more days, I would have tried to push back and maybe see if I could get a couple more fanfics in. But I can't fit in 4 more. It physically would kill my voice. So no, but if anyone else celebrates Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah on the 14th. Ooh. I was pretty chill. 4-day weekend sure went by fast. Agreed. And didn't know. Yeah, no, I celebrate Christmas, but anyone who celebrates Hanukkah or just holidays, happy Hanukkah and/or holidays, or just hope you're having a good day. I did exactly what I wanted, sat at home and watch movies. I remember you saying that that's what you wanted to do, so I'm glad you got to do that, Truffle. And it's exciting that you do a live tree, Truffle. We do not. We have in the past, but now that my parents are older, and I'm also going to be visiting my sister over the holidays, the live tree is more effort. This is just easier for my parents to take care of when I'm not there. So, fake tree it was. It looks really nice, though. I had a lot of... Oh, okay, yours is fake. Okay. I just thought, like, with getting my tree later that week, it sounds like you were physically getting it. Okay. Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, I was going to put up a small real one. Like, we agreed that I think it was like either a 4 or 5 footer that we had for when my niece and nephew would visit, would go in their room. And then she saw it actually out of the box. She was like, that's too small. So we ended up going and getting the usual Christmas tree, which is like either like a 7 or 8 footer. Like, it's nothing crazy big. But I found it funny that she was initially like, just a small one. And it's like, no, too small. Which I get it, but it's like, oh, there goes my day. Cute. Trying to think if anything else happened. As I said before, I bought way too many things on Amazon this weekend for Christmas and like staff gifts for people I work with over the holidays. And Friday's going to be a crazy day for boxes at my house, I'll tell you that. Thankfully, a lot of it I'm shipping to my sister because that's where I'll be during Christmas along with her kids. But it will be interesting. Yeah, I think that's about it. I got a new vest that's very soft and cozy, and I got it at a steal. I'm super excited about that because look at how like cozy this thing is. Oh my goodness, wait, I forgot. Okay, so I got some stuff over the week. It is so cozy. And then it's also got this gigantic hood that's also like fleecy on the inside. And like it's buttons without showing the buttons. So like I was at work and I had outdoor duty and this was nice and toasty and I didn't wear it today. And I was like, oh. So this is going to make lots of reappearances at my work. I can tell you that. So I'm going to do this first. Baby boy finally arrived! So I ordered Wenning from Night Owl Workshop a bit ago, and he finally came in over the Thanksgiving break time, and he looks amazing. He's also like super soft. He's got his little chains. He's got the like cursed mark, and he's super soft, and even like the edgings like kind of like burnt and detailed. So like he's even got like little ragged shoulders. He's super well made. I have some other stuff from Night Owl Workshop. But yeah, here's their business stuff. They do custom orders. It will take a little bit of time because they actually hand make them. But totally worth it. They're so sweet. I've actually met them in person. They do go to conventions around where I live. And they're a super cool person. And I chat with them sometimes just like, what's up? But then also, I am part of a pin club. I think I'll say it right, Buccinelli. They are French, so I'm probably not saying that correctly. But I've been eyeing these for a while. I'm going to turn on just the white light so you can see the colors properly. Oops, not that one. Look at these. our past two book boys. When I saw these went up for sale, I finally pulled the trigger and decided to join their pin club. So once it's confirmed, I've got a Wangshin one coming, and then I think I've got a Bing Shu one coming. I can't remember what this month is. But they're... Right? When I saw there was merch for Pet Fish, I was like, take my money. Take it and, like, don't apologize. But, yes. I am so excited. They're so pretty. And, like, to find both of them at the same time, like, Thousand Autumn and Fish... Like, they also do prints, but they do only limited runs, which is my one complaint with them, is they do very limited runs. So, like, if you miss the month, you miss the month. Like, that's it. Which I was like, but there's so many good ones. It was the Forest Wangshin kiss, so the blindfold kiss. That was the one that got me. I was like, nope, we're subscribing. I need this one. I will get it eventually. I hope. I have confirmed membership and they have taken my money, so I better get it eventually. But anyway, let's go ahead and start. Those are my exciting things. I need to write down the time. But yeah, I am excited and getting into the holiday spirit now that I am not scrambling as much to make these recordings. Okay. So we are starting at 61. And we'll do 1830. Oh yeah, my one complaint is that I think I am getting a cold. And I'm pretty sure I know when. Okay, so we are on our way to the ancient civilization with something Gong. Chen Gong. And we have Yan Wushi, like, either in front of us or on our back, on a horse. We're headed to these ruins, and he's been having some split personality. Hey, you literally had a cracked skull and probably got your brain scrambled around a little bit. Parts of your personality are coming out as literal people. And so... Chen Gong didn't want to waste too much time. He waved his hand, and everyone mounted their houses, ready to depart. Shen Qiao had Yan Wushi mount first, then he moved to sit in front of him in order to steer the horse. Everyone set off. Several dozen horses trotted along the road, the wind and sand muffling everyone's voices. At this time, even speaking became an arduous task, since sand would get in the moment they opened their mouths. No one was willing to eat any sand, so they just hung their heads and continued onward, communicating with each other through gestures. Arms wrapped tightly around Shen Qiao's waist, and a chest pressed right up against his back. Yan Wushi leaned close to his ear and said quietly, "Ah, Qiao, how did I do earlier?" As soon as Shen Qiao heard that gentle tone, he was certain that Yan Wushi was not the normal Yan Wushi. He noticed that he'd been sighing more often the last few days than he'd ever done in the past. Shailing. Yan Wushi was a little surprised. How did you know that my old name was Shailing? Shen Qiao's only answer was silence. So that's where we ended last time. Okay. Brain scrambled Yan Wushi is more pleasant than regular Yan Wushi. I agree. He's a bit of a brat and clingy, but bearable. And I agree. I agree with both of you. Yeah. Chapter 61, Discoveries. If talking with Yan Wushi in the past had him raging himself into an early death, then talking to Yan Wushi right now was like raging to death and then being brought back to life by the force of that same rage. Those who lacked a strong will would surely be unable to continue the conversation. Shen Qiao sighed and decided to just shut his mouth, refusing to speak further. But then the man in the back saw him refusing to talk. His arms tightened as he placed his chin on Shen Qiao's shoulder. Ah, Qiao, why are you ignoring me? Because right now I'm contemplating whether to knock you out before we keep going, Shen Qiao thought. He tilted his head a little to the side and lowered his voice. Since you still remember who you are, then do you know why Chen Gong is looking for carnelian in Ruoqiang, ancient city? I don't know, said Yan Wushi, but I've heard about jade sistanchi before. It usually grows deep inside the Gobi Desert and is normally hidden within rocky crevices. It's incredibly difficult to find and indeed a rare treasure. But it's clear that Chen Gong is only looking for the carnelian. He just brought up jade sistanchi as bait, so he could get us to run here and there for him. I'm probably saying that wrong. It feels like I'm saying that wrong. Even in the past, when he hadn't been injured, Shen Qiao had rarely heard him analyze anything in such a placid tone. Yes, I noticed as well, said Shen Qiao. But even if there is no jade sistanchi, he's holding Bana's grandfather hostage, so I was forced to take the trip with him. However, if we find the jade sistanchi, you'll be able to fully recover from your wounds. In truth, my real wound lies in the flaw within my demonic core. The jade sistanchi would only cure external wounds, so it wouldn't be of much help. Shen Qiao was amused. You have a crack in your skull. The jade sistanchi will spur muscle growth and rejoin bones, so it'll have its uses, no? Surely you must heal the external injuries first. Actually, I don't wish to heal. Yan Wushi sounded dejected. Shen Qiao frowned. Why not? He sensed that Yan Wushi's current personality was different from all the previous ones. Rather, it felt a little like the one who'd smiled gently at him several days ago. Because once I'm healed, I won't be able to talk to you anymore, said Yan Wushi. Don't tell me that you prefer the Yan Wushi who ignored your sincerity and delivered you to San Jingsing. You are him, said Shen Qiao. I am not. Shen Qiao was at a loss. Then who are you? Yan Wushi was silent for a moment. You can call me Ayan. Shen Qiao did not reply. Won't you call me that just once, please? I've never heard you say my name before. Shen Qiao was stupefied. When I look at your face, I can't bring myself to say it. Yan Wushi complained. A face is just the surface, a shell. Why put so much stock in appearances? I know everything he did to you. Yan Wushi might be a fickle ingrate, but I didn't turn my back on you. Qiao, it's impossible to find a second person as kind as you in this world. He might not cherish you, but I will. Won't you let me? Shen Qiao stopped talking and refused to respond further, but Yan Wushi didn't give up. He was about to say more, but then he saw Chen Gong's horse suddenly slow. The other man turned his head to glance at them. Seeing the two of them whispering to each other, he couldn't help but jab at them. Looks like the rumors were untrue. Taoist Master Shen and Yan Wushi get along quite well. That puts me at ease, too. With the kind support from the two of you, I need not worry about failing to find the carnelian on this trip. Shen Qiao looked up at the sky. Having lived here for several days, he'd also gained some understanding of the local weather. Is there a sandstorm coming? Only Yan Wushi would try to double-cross himself, right? Oh, man. Chen Gong naturally didn't know, but he'd brought along people who did. Wurong Qin said, "Correct. There's a small town right ahead of us. My lord, why don't we rest there for the night, then continue our journey tomorrow? We can take the opportunity to change our mounts as well." Oh, hi, Esper Lady. We literally just started. Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao are riding on horses because Chen Gong is forcing them to go to a city. They had a small discussion where they're saying, like, I don't think the stone he's saying is his real goal. But we'll keep an eye out for it because it's got healing properties. And now they're talking about stopping at a small town because it looks like there'll be a sandstorm. But hello, how are you? My lord, why don't we rest there for the night and then continue the journey tomorrow? We can take the opportunity to change our mounts as well. Once this man had been full of arrogance, but now he was perfectly happy to call Chen Gong his lord. Shen Qiao couldn't help glancing at him. Wurong Qin's expression remained the same as ever, as though he didn't find this master-servant relationship insulting to himself in the slightest. He should have venerated the emperor of Qi, Gao Wei, as his lord, yet now he was honoring Chen Gong. Doing great. I'm glad to hear it. As if he sensed his feelings, Yan Wushi leaned over behind Shen Qiao to speak into his ear. The Murong family has already pledged their loyalty to Chen Gong in secret. Yan Wushi's hot breath fanned over his ear, making it so Shen Qiao couldn't help but lean forward himself. After a short journey, they arrived at the little town. With Chen Gong's retinue blaring their wealth and presence, they booked the best inn in town the moment they entered, though in truth it was the town's only inn. Its lodgings were quite a bit worse compared to Bana's house, let alone that of the royal capital. But they were in a remote location, after all, so just finding a place to rest was already quite remarkable. No one had any complaints, and after dinner, everyone returned to their rooms without a word. The inn had a limited number of rooms, so Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi shared one. Shen Qiao wasn't a curious person by nature, but he still found himself concerned at the way Chen Gong had gone from a perfectly ordinary youth to someone so full of mysteries on their next meeting, especially when those mysteries were likely related to the goal of this trip and their safety. Shen Qiao couldn't afford to be lax. If we're talking about power, Chen Gong derives all of his from the Lord of Qi, he mused. So if the Lord of Qi perishes, Chen Gong will be left with nothing. Wurong Qin was the best martial artist in Qi Imperial's court, but he willingly became Chen Gong's subordinate and addresses him as Lord. On a fundamental level, this is incredibly odd. Ever since Yan Wushi's massive shift in personality, his eyes would always follow Shen Qiao. Whether Shen Qiao stood up or sat down, his gaze remained fixed on him, and Shen Qiao, of course, felt it. He wasn't a corpse. Just made him feel terribly awkward. After he finished speaking, he couldn't help but frown. "Why do you keep staring at me?" "Because you're good-looking." Yan Wushi smiled at him, and it was as if 10 miles of peach blossoms were blooming in the spring breeze, their branches glittering like gems as the moon's crystal glow seeped through them. Shen Qiao sighed, realizing that even though this Yan Wushi still wasn't normal, it was still somewhat better than the ones prior. Talk about proper things. "Did Chen Gong know martial arts before?" Yan Wushi suddenly asked. With this reminder, Shen Qiao suddenly realized where that sense of disconnect had come from. Before, not only did Chen Gong not know martial arts, he could barely read more than a handful of characters. Yep, he's definitely still shameless. Of course he is. Where had he learned martial arts from? There'd been the couple of moves he'd learned from Shen Qiao for self-defense, but those were only enough to deal with a bandit or two at most. But the current Chen Gong moved with restraint, his steps limber. It was obvious he'd already passed a certain stage in his martial arts journey. Perhaps not a first-rate martial artist, but at least second-rate, enough to enter into the top ranks of the Jianghu. How could he have progressed by such leaps and bounds in such a short period of time? Most people had to start their trainings at a young age, yet Chen Gong was like a tower that had been erected overnight. It was terribly suspicious. Also, previously, when I said to return to Chang'an, you said that it was too late, Shen Qiao said. Did something happen over there? Will the Lord of Qiao be all right? Yan Wushi shook his head. Having spent most of the day on horseback, his face was heavy with fatigue. Even though he'd only been sitting, spared the need to focus on the road, he was still heavily injured. Just the bumps and jolts along the way had been enough to aggravate those wounds. My head hurts a little. Pained expression surfaced on his face, and he reached towards his head to touch the injury. Shen Qiao saw this right away and grabbed his hand. Don't move. He placed his hand on Yan Wushi's back and channeled a few wisps of true qi inside. Shen Qiao's present internal cultivation came from the Shu Yang strategy and was neutral and gentle. But when it entered Yan Wushi's body, it only aggravated his pain and his expression twisted in agony. Shen Qiao had no choice but to quickly stop what he was doing. Yan Wushi's body was boiling, as if he was standing inside a blazing furnace. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Sect Leader Yan, Shen Qiao called softly. Yan Wushi grabbed his hand. Despite his stupor, he still remembered to say, "Call me Yan." Shen Qiao said not a word. A lot of things you said are a mess in my mind, so I can't explain. Perhaps Yan Wushi knows, but I don't. Does that mean that each personality has limited access to his memories? Shen Qiao pondered this with a frown. Let me sleep a bit first, Yan Wushi said. His voice grew quieter and quieter. By the end of his sentence, his eyes were already closed. In truth, Buddhist Master Shu Ting and the others wanting to kill Yan Wushi wasn't because his death would make the world right again. They'd wanted to stop Huan Yue's sect from expanding its authority in northern Shou, and furthermore, they wanted to stop Huan Yue's sect from assisting the Lord of Shou in uniting the lands. Hence, their final target was Yuan Yang. Now that Yan Wushi was already dead in the eyes of outsiders, Huan Yue's sect was without a leader. Bian Yan Mei would be struggling to stabilize the sect, so he'd definitely be remiss on his protection of Yuan Yang. With this, an opportunity arose for others to take advantage of. So Yan Wushi's too late probably meant that something was about to happen to Yuan Yang. But they'd already arrived in Tuyuhun, which was thousands of miles away from Chang'an, and they were about to enter the vast, desolate desert where few people trod. Even without taking Yan Wushi into consideration, Bana's grandfather was still in Chen Gong's hands, so Shen Qiao couldn't just turn and leave. The only thing he could do now was continue onward and help Chen Gong obtain this carnelian first. Early the next morning, Chen Gong sent his men over to wake them up. Yan Wushi was still in a deep sleep. No matter how they called him, he wouldn't wake. Shen Qiao had no choice but to place Yan Wushi at the front of the horse while he sat behind him. He wrapped his arms around Yan Wushi to hold the reins, thus preventing him from tumbling off along the way. Seeing this, Chen Gong handed him a bottle of medicine. Inside are pills that can increase alertness and replenish qi. Give sect leader Yan a couple. Perhaps they'll help. Thank you, said Chen Qiao, but I don't know what his condition is, so rashly giving him medicine might not be the best decision. Chen Gong smiled. Don't worry. They're concocted of mild ingredients like wolfberry and wild sage. In case they're ineffective, they won't kill him. In my If my guess is correct, he's like this due to the severe injuries he suffered from the fight with Duo Yanshan's group. Normally, I'd be happy to just laugh at him from the sidelines, but right now, we're all in the same boat. If something happens to Yan Wushi, you'll be distracted, which doesn't benefit me at all. He'd spoken the truth. Yan Wushi's situation wasn't looking too hopeful. His body's true qi was in disorder, leaving him unable to accept any from outside sources. Shen Qiao was at the end of his rope. He took the bottle and tipped out 2 pills, then fed them to Yan Wushi. Not long after, the man suddenly moved. He hacked up a large mouthful of blood before slowly opening his eyes. Shen Qiao suddenly realized something. If the pills really only contained mild ingredients, they couldn't have been this effective. What other things are in these pills? He asked Chen Gong. This time, Chen Gong was honest. Ginseng and snow lotus. I didn't tell you before because I was afraid that you wouldn't let him take any, thinking they'd be too potent. Yeah, I'd forgotten how blunt Chen Gong was. Yeah, except when he's being super slimy, and then he's just an asshole. Shen Qiao then asked Yan Wushi, "How do you feel?" He didn't reply, but his drooping eyelids fluttered a little, as if giving him a glance. Then they slid closed again, and he arduously straightened himself while on the horse. But his face was a chilly white, and a faint sheen of sweat covered his forehead. Looks like it won't be an issue to keep going. Let's go. Chen Gong seemed to be in a hurry to reach his destination. Though he didn't show it too much, Shen Qiao could sense it. The little town didn't have any camels they could switch to, so the group could only continue on horseback. Fortunately, the area wasn't completely covered in sand. Scattered rocks could be seen, meaning that they were still in the Gobi Desert. Yan Wushi didn't speak to Shen Qiao again for the rest of the journey. He only drowsily leaned against Shen Qiao's back. The fact that he was still alive was already enough to attract much attention, but Chen Gong's men paid little heed to him, even Muron Qin. They seemed to have another goal in mind, and this goal was far more important than Yan Wushi. It was difficult for horses to travel in the Gobi Desert. As the sandstorm blew harder, they were forced to dismount and walk while leading the horses. Martial artists traveled quickly. After walking for over half a day from dawn to dusk, they were already far from that little town. Only a sea of golden sand lay around them, and even martial experts were helpless against it. Fortunately, they long prepared for this and covered their faces with cloaks and heads with scarves. That way, they'd manage to avoid getting sand in their mouths. The one who walked in front was a rather homely, middle-aged man. Shen Qiao didn't know him, and Chen Gong had no intention of introducing him either. It was obvious he didn't know any martial arts and wasn't part of Muron Qin's group. Chen Gong had brought him to scout out their path. The man held a compass in hand as he rode high astride a horse. Since he was in charge of discerning their direction, someone led the horse for him. Then suddenly he raised his hand. Immediately Muron Qin yelled, "Halt!" Everyone stopped in their tracks and stared at the middle-aged man's back. For a long time, the man watched the compass with his head lowered. Then he turned and jogged over to Chen Gong, wiping haphazardly at the sweat on his face with his scarf. "My lord, something strange. Once we got here, the compass stopped working." Chen Gong's brow furrowed. "Didn't you say before that we should walk in this direction?" Faced with Chen Gong's blazing stare, the man was almost unable to finish his sentence. Yes, but now, please look at this." He passed the compass to Chen Gong, who looked at it. The needle was spinning wildly with no sign of rest. Naturally, Chen Gong didn't understand. What does this mean? The man smiled apologetically. If this lowly one's guess is correct, the ancient city of Ruoqiang that your esteemed self is looking for must be right underneath, and it indeed has something inside it. That something is interfering with the compass needle. Perhaps it's that carnelian you're after. But because of this interference, this lowly one is unable to find the entrance to the city. Everyone raised their heads and looked around, but all they could see was an ocean of yellow sand, blurring even the boundary between heaven and earth. Occasionally, they could spot a few bare rocks nearby, but not even a hint of the so-called ancient ruins. Chen Gong asked Muran-Chin, "What do you think?" Muran-Chin thought for a while. "Why don't we wait for the sandstorm to stop first, my lord? But there's no place to use as shelter here." He turned back to the guide. "Should we keep going, or should we stop here and wait? Give me a definitive answer." Chen Gong's words were flippant, but the man dared not reply recklessly. He hesitated, unable to decide, fearful that they'd make the wrong decision due to his answer, which would cost him his head. He scratched at his face anxiously. It's... "Think carefully before you answer," said Chen Gong coldly. The man shuddered hard, then blurted, "We should keep going." "Are you sure?" Yes, of course. The slowly one will lead the way. Judging by the compass's response, it should be around here somewhere. We'll find it eventually if we keep looking." "Let's go then," said Chen Gong. Everyone continued onward, and Shen Qiao followed behind them. He looked back at Yan Wushi, now sprawled prone on horseback, then hesitated for a moment. "Are you Yan Wushi or someone else?" The man quietly extended a hand from beneath his robe, and grabbed Shen Qiao's wrist, still holding the reins. "It's me, Yan." Shen Qiao had no words, but he internally breathed a sigh of relief. Though he'd saved Yan Wushi, deep inside his heart, he didn't want to have too much contact with him. After Yan Wushi's massive change in disposition, both personalities born from him, Yan and Shai Ling, were much easier to speak with than the original. At least, when he was with them, Shen Qiao could manage to pretend that they were two other people entirely instead of Yan Wushi. Suddenly, a man in front yelled in surprise, "My lord, he's gone!" Just a second. I need to run upstairs to grab something real quick. I will literally be right back. It will just take literally 1 minute. Okay. Sorry. Sorry, guys. I was starting to get a headache and I wanted to get ahead of it. Okay. Chapter 62. 46, 45. Okay. 62. The only one in the world. The moment he said this, everyone looked over. Sure enough, they could find no trace of the middle-aged man, and the yellow sands before them grew increasingly turbid, whipping into whirling eddies over the flat ground. Visibility had dropped to the lowest. Qiao couldn't even see which silhouette was Chen Gong, let alone the middle-aged man. Chen arduously made his way to the front and grabbed Chen Gong. He yelled, "The sandstorm is too strong! My lord, please take shelter over there!" Chen Gong gritted his teeth. "No! None of us know our way around here! We must follow him closely!" Just as he spoke, the sandstorm grew even fiercer. Lifting their heads, they could see the yellow sands being blown by the darkened skies. Tears sprang up as sand blew into their eyes, blurring their vision. Oh, God. That would suck. That's... I cannot deal with eye injuries because I've had so many. Yeah, how about we just let Chen Gong get swept away? I'm okay with that. No, I cannot deal with eye injuries. I've had way too many eye injuries. So that is like my... I can't watch like the horror scenes where they do things to eyeballs. I have to look away because I will start tearing up. I can't. I went half blind in one eye for like 6 months because of a detached retina. So like I don't mess with eye pain or eye shit. Like I have much sympathy for Hua Chang. Okay. In this kind of situation, even the strongest of martial artists was no match for nature. They could only wind their scarves tighter, but the sandstorm made it near impossible for anyone to continue forward. Oh yeah, it came on fast too. Don't ignore if you suddenly can't see. I was very dumb. It was over summer. Was it over summer? Or was it getting to summer? It might have been getting to summer. It was a couple of years ago. But my friend from childhood was having their wedding that Sunday. And I started having symptoms on Wednesday. And I knew if I said anything, that was not going to be a thing that I would be attending. My mom's a retired nurse. So like that would not have flown. And so my dumb butt kept it secret until the weekend when specialists are not in. And so that was a very fun conversation walking into the wedding that I had with my mother, along with a very disappointed look. And a very big wake-up call on Monday when you walk into the doctor and you make them swear. You know it's going to be a very interesting day for you. I actually went to the doctor at the start of this week because I woke up with that eye blurry, and I was like, oh God, not this again. I knew it was probably just dry eye going on, but I was like, I'm not playing this time. No. The guy remembered me. He was like, oh, it's you again. Hello. It's never good when a doctor remembers you. That means you made an impression. But anyway, sandstorm. Oh yeah. Yeah, no. You know what's up, Truffle. Bet you also grew up with tales from the hospital around the dinner table. So like a lot doesn't faze you, I imagine. No. Okay. Shen Qiao clutched Yan Wushi's wrist in a tight grip while doing his best to hunch over, reducing the force of the wind against his body. By the way, my eye's fine. It was dry eye. It's healed up. I'm being better about eye drops, and we're good. But yeah. Frightened, the horses began to struggle. The moment Shen Qiao's attention slipped, the reins were yanked out of his hands. Yeah, same. By the time he looked back, the horse was nowhere to be found. The wind shrieked within his ears, and the haze of endless yellow was all he could see. "My lord, this way!" Shen Qiao dimly heard Muron Chen's words, and he quickly hurried in their direction. But then his next step landed on empty air, and his entire person slid downward. Beneath him seemed to be a bottomless abyss, the sloped walls treacherously steep. Shen Qiao felt like he'd been falling for ages, yet there was still nowhere for his feet to secure himself. Ooh, that sucks. I'm sorry, Truffle. Oof. I have the theory that my friends joke around that I'm made of glass because I end up injuring myself in very interesting ways, and they're no longer surprised when I'm like, "You'll never believe what happened." They're like, "Yes, I will." But I have the theory that it's bad things happen, but it's best possible outcome. A lot of the injuries that I have end up healing okay for the most part, or if it's something serious, like the doctors pick up on it quickly. So it's like I have a relatively positive viewpoint even when my life's going to shit. I'll take what I can get, you know? Okay. And yes, they slid downward. That's good. Like that some people who have been healthy like and not had something big happen don't understand how good of a thing that is. Just to know what it is. Because if you don't know, you can't treat it and you can't get better. So, good. All right. Beneath him seemed to be a bottomless abyss, the sloped walls treacherously steep. Shen Qiao felt like he'd been falling for ages, yet there was still nowhere for his feet to secure himself. Another couple of moments passed before he felt the incline lessen, if only slightly. With one hand holding on to the boulder behind him, Shen Qiao steadied himself, then managed to straighten while standing on the slope. Inky darkness filled his eyes. He couldn't see his hand before his face, but this actually gave him a sense of nostalgic familiarity. The wind that had been howling into his ears had vanished, leaving his surroundings as silent as a grave. Except for the sounds of breathing that came from below, rapid yet feeble. "Who's there?" asked Shen Qiao. Those breaths paused, then after a long silence, they weakly replied, "It's me." Shen Qiao groped his way down the slope, leaping and jumping to where the voice was coming from. "How did you end up down here?" He clearly remembered letting go of Yan Wushi's hand before he fell. "Qiao, my arm seems to be dislocated. My head hurts." Shen Qiao took in Yan Wushi's words silently. "Hello, darkness, my old friend." Yep. Do not mix steroids and strong tea, though. I thought my heart had been switched with a rabbit. I've been on steroids before. I know what you mean, unfortunately, Truffle. Yeah. I have unfortunately figured out the hack of if you really get to that caffeine high, I also have asthma, and so you get your heart racing like that if you take your inhaler. It helps with the shakes, ironically enough. And then you don't feel like you can feel the blood in your veins, which is not good because then I'll drink an unreasonable amount of caffeine just to stay awake and do shit that I have to get done. But anyway, Shen Qiao took in Yan Wushi's words silently. He'd already had that crack in his skull, and now he'd fallen from such a high place. How could his head not hurt? Shen Qiao could only walk over to him. Which arm? Right arm, said Yan Wushi. Shen Qiao felt along the arm and set the joint. Yan Wushi gave a muffled grunt, but he didn't cry out in pain. Wait for me here, said Shen Qiao. I'm going ahead to take a look. But just as he was about to step forward, Yan Wushi grabbed the edge of his robe. Won't your head hurt even more if you stand and walk now? Asked Shen Qiao. Hear that as a charter member of the Too Much Caffeine Club. Yep. No, said Yan Wushi. Shen Qiao didn't want to waste too much time on conversation. He was also afraid that he might end up unable to find Yan Wushi even if he tried to come back, due to the lack of bearings here. Very well. Let's walk slowly and find Chen Gong first. Right? Since when does Yan Wushi do anything that he's told to? He wouldn't be Yan Wushi if he did what he was told to. It was obvious that they were somewhere underground, and it was somewhere quite spacious, perhaps like a cavern. But these happenings had been so strange and bizarre that they couldn't afford to drop their guard. Uneven stones lay beneath their feet. A moment of carelessness would be enough for them to trip. But these stones didn't seem to be randomly placed. In fact, it was the opposite. When Shen Qiao bent over to touch a couple, he found that they had been neatly cut, their edges uniform. There was even faint patterns on their surface, a sure sign that they were man-made. Rua Qiang? Asked Yan Wushi. His voice quavered, and he did his best to speak as little as possible, condensing the sentence. Is this place the Rua Qiang they were speaking of into just 2 syllables? Perhaps the fall had given him another concussion. Shen Qiao made a sound of assent. It's possible. He fished out a torch from his lapels and lit it. The torch's glow was only enough to illuminate a small area around them, but when Shen Qiao managed to discern where they were, his heart involuntarily gave a thump. They weren't standing at the true bottom, because only a couple of steps away, the ground abruptly dropped away, forming another massive pit of depths unknown. If they hadn't fallen here earlier, if their momentum had been just a little greater, they would have fallen into the abyss instead, and who knew how they would have ended up. Right at this moment, Yan Wushi spoke next to his ear. Ah, Qiao, I think I saw someone ahead of us just now. Shen Qiao asked, Did you make out who it was? Yan Wushi's next words were hair-raising. It didn't look like a person. The flaming stick in their hands made them very conspicuous in the darkness. If Chen Gong and his men had seen them, they should have said something. But there was only one path beneath their feet. If they didn't continue onward, they'd have to turn back. Let's go in the opposite direction, then, said Shen Qiao. The path was narrow. Only one person could pass at a time. The firelight flickered as if it was about to go out, yet the darkness was both vast and endless. In a situation like this, the presence of humans became tiny and insignificant, something the darkness could engulf at any moment. Yan Wushi suddenly said, How did you feel back when you were blind? Shen Qiao started slightly, then was silent for a moment. Nothing in particular. It was fine after I got used to it. Why didn't you feel any hatred? Shen Qiao thought for a moment. I did feel resentment, but not hatred. It's exhausting to hold on to too many things. Of course, there are many people with even evil intentions in this world, but There are even more people willing to lend a helping hand. I wish to remember those people, not the things that will only bring me despair and suffering. Yan Wushi sighed. But all of the people I've seen have treated you poorly. If not for you, Chen Gong would never have the glory he possesses today, but not only did he forget the kindness you showed him, he even returned it with further animosity by threatening you into exploring Ruoqiang with him. Shen Qiao countered coolly. There were good people, you just didn't see them. Back when you delivered me to San Jingsing, leaving me no choice but to forsake my own martial arts so he would perish with me, there was a young Taoist priest at Bailong Monastery, and he just happened to be the little boy we saved outside Xiang Province's city. If not for his timely rescue, I wouldn't be standing here and talking to you right now. Afterward, He Huan sect came for me, and though the abbot of Bailong Monastery knew that he could save himself by handing me over, he chose to give up his own life instead. When people like them exist, how can I possibly let myself sink into hatred? Shen Qiao's heart is very small. There's only room enough for good people like them. As for those who don't deserve to be remembered, I won't spare them anything, not even hatred. That's a great policy to live by. Then what about Yan Wushi? Do you not hate him either? If not for the fact that your death might affect the state of both Northern Shou and the world itself, we wouldn't be standing here having this conversation. Yan Wushi laughed. In truth, you do hold hatred, but you're too forgiving and soft-hearted, so even your hatred doesn't last for long. Qiao, your weaknesses are too obvious. That's why anyone can use them to coerce you. Just like Chen Gong did. You could have seized Chen Gong and threatened him into releasing Bana's grandfather. Even that would have been better than following him all the way here. True, said Shen Qiao. I could have done that. But if I did, you'd have no way of escape. You're saying that I should have just left you behind, correct? Yan Wushi answered softly. No, but I understand why my previous self treated you the way he did. He's a paranoid person at heart, someone who'd never trust anyone else. No matter how good you are, he'll always want to bring out the darkness hidden within you. But he doesn't know that you are you. There may be hundreds of thousands of Chen Gongs in the world, but there is only one Shen Qiao. Shen Qiao sighed. Now I really do somewhat believe that you're not him, because Yan Wushi would never say something like that. Yan Wushi said gently, Of course I'm not him. I'm Yan. Don't you have a headache? How can you still talk so much? Yan Wushi went quiet. He no longer made a peep. In the span of their conversation, the two of them had already walked for about 15 minutes, one in front and the other in the back. Shen Qiao suddenly stopped. The torch, down to its last embers, finally flickered out in the darkness. His voice carried some bewilderment. We seem to have come full circle. At the end of the path was a pitch-black cave, exactly the same as the one they'd seen earlier. Was this place a circle all along? So we only walked from one end to the other? He'd just said this when someone's voice came from up ahead. Is that Taoist Master Shen? It was Tuoba Liangzi. Shen Qiao raised his voice in reply. It is. Where are you? I also fell down from above earlier. I hit my head and fainted. I woke up just now. May I ask if Taoist Master Shen has seen our lord and his men? I haven't, said Shen Qiao. We've been unable to find our way out since we fell down. Did you find anything? There's a door here, said Tuoba Liangzi. There seem to be stairs behind it, but it's too dark for me to see. When I fell, my torches went missing as well. Do you have more? I do, said Shen Qiao. There's one left. They might have each other had their own goals and sides, but they were in a cooperative relationship at this moment, and if they wanted to break through, they'd have to work together. Shen Qiao lit the torch and walked over. Sure enough, Tuoba Liangzi was waiting for them at the cavern entrance. As they came closer, it was easy to see the large blood stain on his forehead. Did you find any other passages earlier? No, said Shen Qiao. Then it seems that we can only try going down. Right at this moment, Shen Qiao suddenly saw a hairy hand materialize behind Tuoba Liangzi. It had 5 fingers tipped in reddened nails, and it was about to land on Tuoba Liangzi's shoulder. The thing had approached so silently that they'd actually failed to notice it. He had no idea whether it was even human. Before Shen Qiao could open his mouth, Tuoba Liangzi, too, sensed something wrong. He turned abruptly and thrust his sword at it. But the sword didn't pierce the newcomer's body. Instead, as if it had encountered an iron wall, the tip of his sword actually bent a little. Tuoba Liangzi retreated at top speed. Shen Qiao shoved the torch into Yan Wushi's hand, then drew Shan He Tong Bei while rushing forward. The thing was tall and heavy-set. It didn't look like anyone from the entourage. Shen Qiao remembered Yan Wushi's suggestion that it wasn't human, and he didn't dare be reckless. He channeled Chu Qi into his sword, causing it to glow a faint white. Even if the newcomer was a bronze or iron wall, this thrust would still be able to pierce it through. But though the monster looked clumsy, it was actually incredibly agile. Jumping left and right, it managed to evade Shen Qiao's sword. It seemed entirely focused on Tuoba Liangzi as it spread its fingers and grabbed at him. Now that he was so close to it, Shen Qiao could feel a heavy stench strike him in the face. The monster's body was covered in hair, and its eyes shone a dim green. It looked like an ape. Everything happened in the span of a blink. Tuoba Liangzi had thought that Shen Qiao would take most of the pressure off him. He didn't expect the creature's relentless pursuit as it pounced on him. To his right was a bottomless abyss. Behind him was Yan Wushi. There was no space to dodge, so he could only clamber onto the wall on his left. With a couple of leaps, he was already several yards off the ground. But the ape continued to chase him, and it even followed him up the wall at a speed even greater than them, the martial artists. It was just about to grab Tuoba Liangzi, who leapt to the side and down, but then he did something Shen Qiao could never have expected. He reached out towards Yan Wushi, preparing to grab him and toss him at the ape, thus extracting himself from the situation. But his hand missed as he extended it forward, and he caught nothing but empty air. That's kind of shitty of him. Everybody's kind of like a terrible person in this, or just very self-serving. Hang on. I think I'm getting a cold, which does not fit into my schedule, so I'm not getting a cold. I refuse. Hang on, I gotta write down. Okay. Okay. 63. Several Yan Wushis. The ape pounced atop Tuoba Liangzi, and together they fell into the abyss. Only Tuoba Liangzi's shocked cry lingered, echoing through the empty space around them. Yan Wushi, who'd almost become a human shield courtesy of Tuoba Liangzi, was currently pressed against the stone wall as he gasped. His face was as pale as a ghost, and the flickering, feeble firelight seemed to suffuse it in an almost apathetic, stony coldness. Shen Qiao breathed a sigh of relief, then went up to take his pulse. "Are you all right?" Yan Wushi stiffened a little at first, but he soon relaxed and let him press down on his wrist. Shen Qiao's brows were tightly pinched, but it wasn't due to his reaction. "Why is your true qi growing increasingly chaotic? It's like it's brawling within your body." Right, that's the spirit, right? Oh, thank you, Truffle. Yan Wushi said, "I used my true qi just now." Shen Qiao could hear just how exhausted and spent he was from those couple of words. It was a shock. Before he could react, Yan Wushi was already collapsing towards him, his entire body falling against Shen Qiao. Shen Qiao was forced to catch him. Unprepared for the icy cold of his skin, Shen Qiao jolted, shuddering. The situation was a little similar to what had happened in Chen during Yan Wushi's qi deviation after dueling Ruyan Qihuai. The seeds of his current illness had also been planted that day. Yan Wushi was trembling as well. It made him unconsciously try to press closer to Shen Qiao, wanting to draw some warmth. Due to what had happened last time, Shen Qiao didn't dare to pass true qi to him carelessly. "How are you feeling? If you can't walk, let's rest here for a moment first." Yan Wushi forced 2 words out through gritted teeth. "Let's go." Shen Qiao sighed. He bent at the waist, pulled Yan Wushi onto his back, then walked towards the cavern exit, using his sword as support. Sect leader Yan, who'd once been unrivaled throughout the Jianghu, who'd disdained all great heroes as unworthy, had probably never dreamed that he'd see such a day. They didn't have any torches left, but before the last one died, Shen Qiao had indeed spotted stairs beneath the cavern exit. They were incredibly steep, but the existence of stairs meant that people had once lived down there in the past. Most likely, it was there that the ancient city of Ruoqiang that Chen Gong was looking for waited. The man on Shen Qiao's back continued to shiver, but his will was so strong that he refused to let out a single moan. As you just said, Truffle, that's the spirit. The ape that had attacked them earlier must have lived here for a long time. It grabbed Tuoba Liangzi and fallen down with him, so did that mean that below them wasn't the bottomless abyss they'd imagined, but a passage leading somewhere else? Shen Qiao walked down the stairs, step by step, thinking as he went. Yan Wushi said hoarsely, "I'm not a Yan." Shen Qiao grunted in reply, "I know." The man's expression when he'd watched Tuoba Liangzi fall, and the way he'd reacted when Shen Qiao touched his gate of life was enough to tell Shen Qiao that the personality within Yan Wushi's body had changed again. After interacting with him for several days, Shen Qiao had roughly inferred what was going on. One of the personalities was his original one, which he'd tentatively referred to as Yan Wushi. Another one was the one who called him Mei Ren Gaga, Shailing. Though this personality was somewhat innocent, his guard was just as high and he disliked speaking. However, he trusted Shen Qiao, probably because Shen Qiao had been the first person he'd seen upon waking up, or perhaps because he could sense that Shen Qiao didn't have any malice. In any case, Shailing did anything he was told to do, which made dealing with him fairly painless. The real Yan Wushi would never do something like that. And the last personality was the one who'd been conversing with him earlier. This personality had a much milder temper, and you could discuss some things with him. Out of all of Yan Wushi's personalities, he was the easiest to get along with. Shen Qiao asked, Then who are you right now? But Yan Wushi's answer was paradoxical. I'm him, but I'm also not him. The true chi within his body was rampaging, so he must have been in extreme agony at that moment. But if he didn't want to focus on the pain, he could only distract himself by talking. So you aren't Yan Wushi or Shai Ling or Yan? I don't know. My head is a mess. Sometimes I recall certain things, and sometimes I feel like those things didn't actually happen to me. Maybe I don't even know the things I did just a moment ago. Shen Qiao was already used to this kind of situation. Once we find the Jade Sistan Chi, your situation should take a turn for the better. The Jade Sistan Tea can only heal external injuries. It's ineffective against internal ones. Then what must you do to fully recover? Wait until I patch the flaw in the failing scriptures. Didn't you say that it's impossible to repair the flaw in the demonic core? Tinged with surprise, Shen Qiao's voice echoed down the passage. Yan Wushi couldn't remember much at the moment, but he still recalled how he had treated Shen Qiao. How when he'd personally delivered him to San Jingsing, he had almost been able to see Shen Qiao's heart withering within his eyes. How Shen Qiao had said to him, "The reason I'm met with betrayal after betrayal isn't because I'm naive. It's because I believe that kindness will always exist. If there were no fools like me, where would sect leader Yan find your pleasure?" And it hadn't been long since then. Just how had Shen Qiao felt when he'd faced him anew? "I've already found the method," he said coolly. There was still a hint of remaining warmth within his chest, left there by Shai Ling and Yan, from their feelings whenever they thought about Shen Qiao. Ooh, I'm going to read that again, just in case you missed it. There was still There was still a hint of remaining warmth within his chest, left there by Shai Ling and Yan, from their feelings whenever they thought about Shen Qiao. Hello! But at this moment, Yan Wushi forcefully wiped it away, and his gaze fell a short distance in front of Shen Qiao. And then he goes and does that. So we had progress, and now it's gone. "Someone's there," he said. At precisely the same moment, Shen Qiao stopped. He'd also heard it. That fleeting yet heavy sound of breathing. "Who's there?" Shen Qiao asked. "It's happening!" And it passed. Sorry, Annika. Not quite yet. There's hints, but it's not quite yet. In the darkness, a pair of glowing green eyes shone like ghost fire lamps, suspended in midair as they stared at the two. At the same time, the thick, heavy stench of blood spread through the area. The ancient city of Ruoqiang, decrepit and neglected for ages, was indeed full of dangers. Dun, dun, dun! All right. Chapter 64. Chapter 64. Exhausted. Shen Qiao stood still and didn't move. The other party didn't approach either. The two of them stared each other down in a stalemate, making for a rather eerie atmosphere. Shen Qiao had already seen those dim green eyes on the other ape, so seeing them again didn't come as much of a surprise. He only thought it somewhat strange. Why were there so many apes in this desolate, sealed-off ruin? Could they really survive down here for hundreds of years without any food or water? Watching Shen Qiao bide his time, showing no signs of rashness, those eyes couldn't restrain themselves any longer. They flashed briefly in the dark, then the green glow faded, and everything was engulfed in darkness once more. The stench of blood quickly faded as well, disappearing into the distance. It had left? Just like that? The stairway was incredibly long, and as Shen Qiao groped along the walls, he found that they were more or less all carved on both sides with engravings. It was clear that this had been a flourishing city in the past. After Luolan annexed Ruoqiang, the country had disappeared from historical records, together with all its people and countless treasures. So the segment about Luolang annexed Ruoqiang, also known as Kruran, an ancient kingdom located along the Silk Road. It was later named Shanshan during the Han Dynasty. Perhaps Lulan had plundered it all, or perhaps it had just been buried and lost to time. In any case, the slow flow of history had nothing to say about them anymore. Step by step, Shen Qiao descended the stairs while carrying Yan Wushi. Within the expansive, far-reaching darkness, his pace seemed to slow, each step stretching out infinitely. Because of his injuries, Yan Wushi was unable to suppress his breathing, which made his breaths sound somewhat heavy as they lingered by Shen Qiao's ear, together with the faint puffs of hot air. Then there was the sound of Shan He Tong Bei as it tapped against the ground, probing out a path. It all gave Shen Qiao the illusion that the staircase was never ending. Since there was no end to it, why not stop and rest for a moment? No matter how much farther they walked, they wouldn't be able to leave anyway. Suddenly, he felt an icy coldness against his nape. Yan Wushi's hand had touched him there, and Shen Qiao couldn't help but shudder. The place had been stale and airless for many long years. Staying here for an extended time would cause someone to feel stifled. Their minds would grow dull, and they'd become dazed and lethargic. Just before, Shen Qiao's mind had been completely focused on the ape. His attention had slipped, and he'd almost fallen into that trap. "Many thanks," he said. Yan Wushi didn't reply. Shen Qiao was already used to this. The true qi of Yan Wushi's body was in disorder. He couldn't even control himself and was constantly switching between personalities. The current one probably didn't like to talk. The two of them walked some distance when suddenly Shen Qiao felt that the stairs beneath him had disappeared, only to be replaced by flat ground. The walls on either side of the staircase also vanished, but this one made him more discomforted, as he had no idea just how much larger this open space was, nor what traps might suddenly spring up beneath his feet. A sword soundlessly thrust toward Shen Qiao's face. The blade, as cold as autumn water, didn't even glint within the darkness. But Shen Qiao had stayed in the dark for a long time. He was accustomed to using his ears to discern anything, and they were exceptionally sensitive. The sharp blade point was still a mere inch from his eyes, but he had already leapt into the air, sweeping backward with his sword across his chest. With a loud clang, the attack was dissipated. Before Shen Qiao could speak, the other party began questioning him. "What demon goes there? Tell me your name!" Finding the situation awkward, Shen Qiao countered. "And who is this distinguished gentleman?" Whoever it was, they managed to recognize his voice. "Taoist Master Shen?" "And you are?" asked Shen Qiao. "I'm Chu Ping," said the man. "I came together with our lord." Hang on. So I couldn't help but, the the line, but Shen Qiao had stayed in the dark for a long time. He was accustomed to using his ears to discern everything. The line, Shen Qiao had stayed in the dark for a long time. It just gave such Batman vibes for a moment. I was internally chuckling. Like, I couldn't. He was used to the dark. Like, all right, buddy, calm down. Chen Gong had brought around a dozen men with him. Other than the likes of Muran Qin, whom Shen Qiao already knew, Shen Qiao had almost no interactions with the rest of them. Shen Qiao made a sound of assent. Where's Chen Gong? My lord and the others are in front of us. Just now a monkey-like monster carried off 2 of our men, so I thought you were also. Forgive my rudeness. Please come with me, Taoist Master Shen. His voice was shaking with fear, and he was panting as he spoke. It was evident that he'd just gone through a treacherous battle. Are there any traps here? Asked Shen Qiao. No, said Chu Ping. This place should be a terrace, but we'll be turning a corner just up ahead. My lord and the others are right beyond the corner. Shen Qiao used the sound of Chu Ping's footsteps to discern the direction they were headed and followed after him. After walking for a while, he heard someone ahead of them say, Who is it? It's me, Oorang Patriarch, said Chu Ping. I've found Taoist Master Shen and his friend. Muran Qin's voice sounded a little strained. Hurry over here! Chu Ping grew nervous as well. What happened? Did that monkey return? Muran Qin didn't respond. Then there was a hiss in the dark, and a flame burst to life above his hand. With the help of the firelight, Shen Qiao could see that there were other people standing beside Muran Qin, but their numbers had clearly decreased from before. I am the dark, right? Upon seeing Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi, an expression of relief washed over Chen Gong's face. I'm glad the 2 of you are fine. What happened here? Asked Shen Qiao. The gale blew away the sand and revealed a deep pit, which led down to Ruoqiang's ancient city, so we dropped down. However, this place is quite large, and we didn't all drop down together, so some of our men got separated. Then where should we go now? Chen Gong answered each of his questions. We just scouted the area. If our guess is correct, we should be inside the walls of the original city. Jade Sistanchi. Maybe it's just Sistanch. Maybe the E is silent. Sistanch? That sounds better. I'm going to call it that from now on. Jade Sistanch grows underground, so we must find the passage that leads below ground within the city, then continue down from there. The city has been buried beneath the sand for hundreds of years, Shen Qiao pointed out. Even if there were a passage, it's probably been blocked for a long time. We might not be able to find it even after consuming all our supplies. No need to worry, said Chen Gong. Before coming here, I saw a rough depiction of the city layout from Ruoqiang's time, so I have some idea of where this passage might lead. Back then, Ruoqiang's people constructed an altar on the north side of the capital. The passage should be beneath it, so we only need to find that northern altar. There are some monsters here. You may have met them earlier. Likely a kind of ape that's been dwelling here for a while. They have sharp eyes and ears, and they're used to the dark. Their physical capabilities are comparable to those of martial artists, so we must be careful so as to not repeat our mistakes. He hadn't only said these words for Shen Qiao. They were more directed at the subordinates with him, probably because they'd lost a couple of people earlier. The men immediately agreed in unison, then, with Muran Qin leading the way, they followed the fire glow deeper inside. Their increased numbers gave everyone a sense of security, and they were suddenly much more at ease, especially now that Shen Qiao had joined them. After they had personally witnessed how he'd been a match for both Du Yanshan and Yu Ai together, their hearts had all placed him in the ranks of first-rate martial artists. Certainly, few people knew of Kun Yi's death. Once this news spread, likely no one would dare look down upon Shen Qiao anymore. The Jianghu was simply that pragmatic. Concealed beneath the lofty sentiments and ideals, beneath the blades, were the same beliefs as everywhere else. Survival of the fittest and the strong were king. The apes hiding low in the dark also seemed to fear their numbers, for none came out and they traveled smoothly for quite a while. Logically speaking, since Ruo Qiang was a small country even before its destruction, the capital couldn't be that large either. The distance they'd walked should have been more than enough to take them from the south side of the city to the north. Though everyone had their doubts, considering the gap in social status, they dared not recklessly question Chen Gong. Only Shen Qiao asked, "How much longer will it be?" Chen Gong was also a little uncertain. After all, what he'd seen inside the imperial palace of Qi, had only been an incomplete map left behind from the Han Dynasty. We should almost be there. However, no sooner than he'd said this, someone within their group suddenly called quietly, "Lu Lang has disappeared." Soon after, there was a shout of surprise. "What is this?" To conserve their torches, Muron Chin was the only person who'd lit one. Before he could shine it over, someone was already fumbling with his lapels, trying to find another one to light, but perhaps due to his panic, his trembling hands dropped the torch and it fell right to the ground. Muron Chin rushed over and directed his firelight at the ground. On top of the torch that had fallen was a hairy spider. Its entire body was dark gray and even excluded its legs. It was the size of a full-grown man's palm. Three white stripes marked its back, giving the impression of a person with its eyes closed. Once the spider began to crawl, the eyes opened as if they were blinking. That sounds horrifying. None of them had ever seen something so eerie. They weren't scared, exactly, but they felt indescribably disgusted, and their hair stood on end. Someone couldn't take it anymore and swung his sword at the spider, slicing it right in half. However, as soon as he did, many more baby spiders burst out of its abdomen, and one after another, they all crawled towards the men's feet. "Lu Lang! That's Lu Lang!" Someone had lit up a new torch. As the light it cast flickered around a spot far away, they saw a corpse collapse there, still wearing familiar robes. But the body itself was shriveled, the skin stretched tightly over the bones. It was horrific. "Don't let those things close!" yelled Muron Chin. He unsheathed his sword as he spoke, and a couple of sword glares flashed, instantly killing all the spiders that had been crawling towards him and Chen Gong. But the others weren't so lucky. The baby spiders crawled at an astonishing speed, climbing up their feet and legs. They slipped into any crevice they could find, and the moment they touched warm skin, they injected their venom, paralyzing their victims. Those victims didn't feel anything, even as their blood was sucked dry. They couldn't even make a sound. I'm going to put a heads up. I'm not going to put a trigger warning for arachnophobia, but I will put a heads up like, hey, spiders. Like, maybe in the description, like, spoiler, arachnophobia. Well, I can put a little warning at 134. Arachnophobia. Arachnophobia warning. Yeah. Yeah. The eyeball thing, kind of, that'd be freaky, just to see a blinking eyeball suddenly coming at you. Well, and then the spiders bursting out of the stomach. Like, no, that's out of a horror movie. Okay. They couldn't even make a sound. In the blink of an eye, 2 or 3 more men collapsed. As lackeys responsible for odd jobs, who ran back and forth for Chen Gong, they only knew a couple of moves and were completely unable to react in time. Like Lu Lang, they fell silent to the ground. Oh, hi, Peacock Pages. Welcome to the 8 men and eyeball spiders. We have found Ruo Chiang, and it is awful. Yan Wushi now has 3 different personalities that we know of. The one right now is pretty mellow. Chen Gong is still a dick. And that's kind of where we're at right now. They basically fell down a hole in a sandstorm, and it's like, oh, hey, ancient city. They haven't found where in the ancient city they need to go. Yeah, really creepy spiders. Don't forget that bit. Yeah. They're eyeball blinking spiders. So that apparently if you cut them in half, baby spiders burst out of them. Yep. So fun part to come back in. I will be putting an arachnophobia warning. So don't worry. Spiders and 3 Wushis, Jesus. Pretty much. Don't let those things close, yelled Muranchin. He unsheathed his sword as he spoke, and a couple of sword glares flashed, instantly killing all the spiders that had been crawling towards him and Chen Gong. But the others weren't so lucky. The baby spiders crawled at an astonishing speed, climbing up their feet and legs. They slipped into any crevice they could find, and the moment they touched warm skin, they injected their venom, paralyzing their victims. Those victims didn't feel anything even as their blood was sucked dry. They couldn't even make a sound. In the blink of an eye, 2 or 3 more men collapsed. As lackeys responsible for odd jobs who ran back and forth for Chen Gong, they only knew a couple of moves and were completely unable to react in time. Like Lu Lang, they fell silently to the ground. The others were horrified. They dared not be careless anymore. They all drew their weapons and began hacking at those spiders. But the spiders were too small, and more continued to pour from some unknown source. The surrounding darkness, combined with the nervousness, meant it was easy to overlook some. And when they sliced open a couple of large ones, more small ones would crawl out. It was impossible to kill them all, and impossible to guard themselves completely. The only exception was Shen Qiao, standing beneath Shan He Tongbei's sword screen. No spiders approached him, and he kept Yan Wushi shielded behind him. His sword sheath wrapped around them watertight, a small white waterfall within the darkness so brilliant and dazzling that no one could look away. The spiders targeted the weak and feared the strong. When they realized they couldn't get close to Shen Qiao, they all turned around and surged towards the others. Chen Gong angrily lambasted his men. Don't pierce their abdomens! Use fire! Burn them with fire! He kept himself occupied as well, a sword in one hand, a torch in the other, as he swung it toward the ground. The spiders were afraid of the firelight and dared not come closer. This feels like the author saw both Indiana Jones and aliens while in an altered state of consciousness. You're not wrong, Truffle. It definitely gives that vibe. He took the opportunity to burn some, but the torches were limited. As he watched the spiders rush forth in endless waves, crawling over several of his men who had already fallen, Chen Gong was forced to command the remaining men. Run forward! But when it rained, it poured. Right at that moment, everyone felt a cool breeze blow behind them. Before they could react, someone screamed while collapsing forward. The demon monkeys! Someone yelled, white with terror. The demon monkeys are back! Caught between a rock and a hard place, they couldn't run even if they wanted to. In their panic, they subconsciously gathered where Muranchin and Shen Qiao were, for those two were the strongest of their group. So far, they'd been handling the situation with ease, completely unscathed. But things weren't easy for Shen Qiao either. 2 apes leapt towards him at the same time. He had to deal with the spiders in front of him while taking on those 2 apes, and he needed to protect Yan Wushi as well. Forced to juggle 3 things at once, he could barely keep up. It was exactly like Chen Gong had said. Having lived in the dark for a long time, the apes had developed night vision. Like cunning hunters hiding in the shadows, they coldly watched as the spider's assault drove everyone into a panic, then took the best opportunity to attack, wanting to fell them in a single blow. The clang of weapons sounded incessantly, but many of them realized that whenever they thrust out their swords, even if it seemed like they should be able to pierce right through those creatures' chests, they would either be blocked by the hard, steely hide beneath the ape's fur, or the ape would evade at the last moment. They had to worry about those blood-sucking spiders while dealing with the tireless apes, and within a couple of rounds, they were thoroughly exhausted from the fighting, their bodies all sporting various injuries. The nails of those apes seemed to be tipped in a kind of poison as well, for the cuts they left began to burn with pain. Yan Wushi suddenly spoke up. The apes are the spider's natural enemy. The moment they appeared, the spiders retreated. I both wish this was in the Donghua and would probably have nightmares for days. Right? Okay, I'm gonna say maybe the spider warning is over. Because I see the line, the disgusting spiders had all vanished. His voice was weak and hoarse, devoid of his old arrogance that proclaimed that everything was beneath his concern. But there was a strange power in his words. The moment he spoke, everyone found themselves listening to him attentively. Everyone who heard what he said froze. In what little time they could spare while fighting the apes, many of them looked at the ground. Indeed, those disgusting spiders had all vanished. It's like they're losing a game of Jumanji. Exactly. 1:43:15. Without the spiders hampering them, it was as if a huge load had been lifted and everyone's spirits rose immediately. For a time, true chi flowed forth, while swords swept up gusts of winds, forcing those apes to retreat a couple of paces. But it didn't last for long. A long, drawn-out howl rose in the darkness, like a woman's wailing, and the apes' attacks grew fierce once more. Some of them pounced forward, despite being wounded by the group's sword chi, as if ready to fight to the end. Spiders and apes in ancient ruins, yeah. Very Jumanji. Shen Qiao said to Yan Wushi, "That should be the apes' leader, commanding them. We must capture it, or we'll have no peace. Go hide by Muron Chin. I'll go look for the leader. I probably won't be able to protect you for a while." Yan Wushi grunted in assent, but said nothing else. After all, the two of them had never been friends in the first place. Of course, they couldn't be considered enemies now, but while Yan Wushi's current personality might be different from the original one, it was just as callous. If he'd told Shen Qiao something like, "Be careful," that would have surprised him more. He watched as Yan Wushi pressed himself against the cavern wall and quickly vanished into its protruding cracks. The apes wouldn't be able to find him for now. Then Shen Qiao leapt up the wall, using those jutting rifts as footholds. With a few ups and downs, he vaulted towards the source of that howl and quickly slipped into the darkness. Shen Qiao's Taoist robes fluttered as he landed, light and agile, sword in hand. Under the broad daylight, he would have appeared full of immortal poise and drawn countless eyes. Unfortunately, in this place, everyone could barely look after themselves. Only Yan Wushi sent a keen look at his disappearing figure. Then, instead of going to Chen Gong and Muron Chin for protection like Shen Qiao had told him to, he circled around everyone and went further into the darkness. No one noticed his disappearance, least of all Shen Qiao. His eyes were closed as he used his ears to discern the leader's location. But ever since the scream, it made no sound, so Shen Qiao could only grope forward based on his impressions. The clanging of weapons from below grew farther and farther away. Shen Qiao held his breath as he melded into the ruins and broken tiles behind his back. There he could keenly feel the endless quiet and unknowns brought on by the darkness. Suddenly, the scream rang out again. It was long and mournful before suddenly turning shrill, like a bugle call or alarm. Below them, the herd of apes once again began attacking Chen Gong and his men in a frenzy. Now was the time. Clang! With a cry like a fledgling phoenix, Shan He Tong Bei sprang forth from its sheath. Shen Qiao pushed off the ground and leapt into the darkness. There was no support to be found within the dark, but he glided through the air. The strike of his wasn't flashy in the slightest, but it was impossibly fast. His sword glare seemed to engulf him completely, turning him into a white arc as he swept through the void, tinged with purple as if heralding a propitious result. It shot straight towards the source of that sound. The sword glare surged as it traveled. The ape was a living creature, so naturally it must have sensed the danger. But it was the leader, the ruler over this ancient ruin, and had commanded absolute power for so long. When it saw that someone dared to challenge its authority, its first instinct wasn't to run, but to pounce at Shen Qiao in a rage. With it illuminated by the sword glare, Shen Qiao realized that the ape in question was different from the rest. It had the face of a man. Even more unsettling were the pair of flashing green eyes within that hairy human face, glaring balefully at Shen Qiao. Its claws carried the stench of blood along with another strange, unidentifiable smell. It completely ignored Shen Qiao's sword glare and slammed upon him like a mountain crashing down. Shen Qiao suddenly realized what the smell was. It was the smell the spiders released as they lay dead on the ground. Having lived for so long underground and lacking any other source of food, they must have fed on the spiders, and over time they became the spiders' natural enemies. That was why the spiders had all fled the moment they appeared. But to the apes, the sudden appearance of so many people was a huge new food source. This drew them over, and they began their relentless pursuit. The ape had no idea of the sword glare's power. It thought its hide tough like bronze and iron, and so it fearfully swiped at him, the attack ferocious and carrying that same reek. If that blow scored a single hit, Shen Qiao's brains would definitely splatter all over the ground. The two clashed head-on. Wrapped in true qi, the sword glare tore the ape's skin right open. The blade sank a few inches into its flesh. The leader of the apes was both shocked and enraged. It immediately shrieked. Hearing this, the apes tirelessly surrounding Chen Gong's group abandoned them. They leapt up the cavern walls, changing their target to Shen Qiao. The apes weren't only agile and capable of powerful attacks, they also possessed hides as strong as steel. Normal weapons couldn't scratch them at all. Even Shan He Tong Bei could only harm them when infused with true qi. If it had been a one-on-one match, Shen Qiao could have fought without fear, but with a dozen of them pouncing upon him instead, even a Grand Master, the likes of Buddhist Master Shu Ting, would have been overwhelmed. He immediately withdrew his sword and retreated, but now that he'd wounded the leader of the apes, making his escape wouldn't be so easy. Not only did it pounce at Shen Qiao, it had commanded the remaining apes to surround him as one. When Muran Qin saw that Shen Qiao had drawn the apes away, he quickly said to Chen Gong, "My lord, let's hurry and leave." But Chen Gong said, "No, go help him." Muran Qin was a little dismayed. "My lord?" Chen Gong frowned. "We're all in the same boat. Shen Qiao has been of great help to us, so we should help him if we can." With that, he leapt upward with his sword. Having no other choice, Muran Qin and the others gritted their teeth and followed. However, The ape leader loathed Shen Qiao for injuring it and was determined to rip him into pieces. Under the threat of their leader, the other apes were also uninterested in fighting Chen Gong's group. They all rushed towards Shen Qiao. If anything, Shen Gong's interference only made them more frenzied and agitated, completely unafraid of death. So much so that the moment Chen Gong's attention slipped, a slash deep enough to show the bone was gored into his arm. When he saw this, Muran Chen yelled out in a panic, "My lord!" He rushed over to administer medicine to Chen Gong while the others shrank back at the sight of his injury. Shen Qiao had no connections with them in the first place. Even though he was in a tight spot now due to wanting to capture the leader first, it also happened to resolve their crisis as well. Muran Chen spoke to Chen Gong in a hushed voice. "My lord, there's no time to lose. Once those demon apes kill Shen Qiao, they're going to turn on us and we'll be in trouble. Let's leave, quickly." Chen Gong was silent for a moment. Then, having made up his mind, he yelled, "Retreat!" Before they left, he turned his head back and up. In the midst of the apes' frenzied, frightening shrieks, those few blazing sword glares shone fiercely, but they also gave the impression of stranded helplessness. It was impossible to say how much longer Shen Qiao would last. Chen Gong withdrew his gaze, then left with Muran Chen and the others, never glancing back. As Shen Qiao killed two of the apes, he indeed began to grow fatigued. After all, his martial abilities hadn't fully recovered. Furthermore, those apes seemed to have gone mad. One after another, they threw themselves at the sword chi without any sense of self-preservation. But his sword chi couldn't last forever. Shen Qiao slashed open a long cut in the chest of one ape, and its blood splattered his face, the nauseating stench slamming into him alongside. And Shen Qiao's movements couldn't help but pause at this. While the other apes were attacking Shen Qiao, the leader had been biding its time, waiting for its chance. Now that it had managed to glimpse one, it howled and leapt at Shen Qiao, grabbing him while shoving him backward. The ape was holding him tightly. Shen Qiao couldn't struggle free. His entire body was forced to fall back, and he lost his footing, falling into a deep pit. Right at this moment, the leader of the apes released him. As the other apes grabbed it by the tail, it viciously shoved Shen Qiao into that pit, then gave a loud roar as if it was celebrating its victory. Carrying Shen Qiao's weight, Shan He Tongbei scored a long trail of sparks in the wall, but Shen Qiao still couldn't stop his descent. The pit seemed like a real abyss. He had no idea how long it'd take to reach the bottom. His arm grew numb and sore, and every single wound upon his body was hurting. He'd been injured while fighting those apes. At this point, he could feel a burning, excruciating agony. Shen Qiao looked down. Below him glowed a faint red. He didn't know what it was. He'd already lost all feeling within his arm. In a moment of carelessness, Shan He Tongbei left the wall and his entire person plummeted down. But this plummet had only just started when someone firmly grabbed him by the other arm. Shen Qiao lifted his head and saw that Yan Wushi had somehow appeared. In order to grab onto Shen Qiao, his entire upper half was over the edge. "Hold on tight," he said to Shen Qiao, his voice severe. All right. I'm going to blow my nose, take a drink, and then we will read our last chapter for the night. By the way, do you like my Christmas tree? I haven't nerdified it yet. I have some paper men and maybe some peppers that I'll throw on it just because I'll make it an MXTX tree, but it's chilling in the corner. Ugh, it just breathed in wig hair. Ugh, gross. It's sitting in the corner because it's severely wobbly. So I need to get some weights down on it, but I'm too lazy right now. I've got other stuff going on. Thank you. Yeah, I'll probably like move it out maybe towards the like white mushroom hat so it's a little more visible. Once I get the stuff to balance it out, but yeah. I kind of just wanted it here and very barely decorated it. But it will become more fancy in the coming days. All right. Chapter 65. 156:45. Okay. Chapter 65. Poisoned. With this buffer, Shen... Oh, I forgot my water. Hang on. Okay. With this buffer, Shen Qiao was able to catch his breath. He forcefully jammed Shen He Tongbei into the wall while his feet caught a jutting crack. Drawing a deep breath, he flipped himself upward to where Yan Wushi was hiding. This place wasn't a true cave. Instead, it was a crack in the stone wall that had become a fissure due to its age. Buried by wind and sand, baptized by the slow march of years, the city had long become part of the underground itself. Before he could ask, Yan Wushi said, "Down there should be the red carnelian that Chen Gong is after." Earlier, Shen Qiao had had his hands full trying to secure himself, so he hadn't paid much attention. Now, as he looked down, he realized that there was a sea of glittering red beneath him. If they'd been in broad daylight, the red shine wouldn't have been particularly dazzling, as it was only the light from the ore itself. But it was luminous, translucent, and beautiful, and in the darkness it was enough to cast their faces crimson glow. From here all the way to the front, the winding passage twisted and turned. Carnelian's deposits illuminated their surroundings on the left and right, but they were all buried deep within the rocks. There was no way to dig them out. They were indeed beautiful, but what did Chen Gong need them for? The Emperor of Qi favored him greatly, showering him with endless riches and glory. Even Murong Qin was willing to serve him, loyal and steadfast, to say nothing of the money and treasures he must possess. The Chen Gong of the past had nothing, so perhaps he'd have been willing to risk his life for the carnelian. But the current Chen Gong had too much. Why would he still come here despite all the dangers? Could he have another goal? Yes. I'll give you a spoiler. Yes, he does. Shen Qiao thought the Chen Gong he had reunited with had long changed completely as a person. He couldn't use his old insight to appraise his schemes and cunning now. He withdrew his gaze and looked back. Many thanks. Why are you here? Yan Wushi didn't answer the question. There's a path here that leads underground. Shen Qiao was surprised. You already went down? I didn't get very close. There were 2 apes guarding it nearby. Then, did you see the jade Sistanch? Yan Wushi gave an affirmative. Shen Qiao briefly inspected his own condition. He had about a dozen wounds, both large and small, scattered over his body. Most of them were cuts inflicted by the apes back when he'd been protecting Yan Wushi, but there were also scrapes and bruises from his fall. However, these were all flesh wounds. The poison on those apes' claws was also only a mild one, and he'd already expelled it by circulating his true qi. In comparison, the injuries Chen Gong's group had suffered were quite a bit more severe. Those apes have lived here for hundreds of years without seeing the light of day, all while consuming the human-faced spiders and jade cistanch. Their hides are like iron. Weapons can't hurt them unless infused with true qi, and their bodies are as light as a swallow. That's what makes them so difficult to deal with. But Shen Qiao's spirits actually rose. Let's go then. Since we're already here, we might as well go the full way. Once we have the jade cistanch, we'll soon be able to heal your external injuries. Then Wushi glanced at him. Do you need to rest? Shen Qiao shook his head. Let's grab the jade cistanch first, lest we meet with Chen Gong's group again and more problems arise. Yan Wushi nodded and didn't add more. Come with me. He stood and began walking, leading the way as Shen Qiao followed behind him. As they left that stretch of carnelian, the red glow faded and their path was once again plunged into darkness. They moved as lightly as possible, the sounds of their breaths mingling with the rustling of their clothes. But their actual silhouettes remained separate, with one in the front and the other in the back, intimate in impression, yet estranged in reality. It wasn't a short distance, and there were quite a few twists and turns along the way, but as Yan Wushi had already walked it once, his pace was fairly brisk. After about 15 minutes, he suddenly halted. Fortunately, Shen Qiao reacted quickly and came to a stop immediately, otherwise he would have run into him. Yan Wushi looked back and said quietly, Right in front is... However, before he could finish, a stench assaulted them from the front. Shen Qiao yanked Yan Wushi behind himself, then raised the sword in his right hand to block. A massive weight suddenly slammed down from above. Taken by surprise, Shen Qiao was forced back 3 steps before he quickly drew his sword and slashed at it. The ape shrieked and leapt back, then quickly pounced once again. At the same time, another ape also leapt into the fray. Entrenched within the darkness, Shen Qiao couldn't see, but his other senses sharpened. He backed up a few steps, waiting until those apes leapt over together. Then he channeled true qi into the blade and transformed it into a white arc. Caught off guard, the apes screamed in pain as they were slashed by its edge before immediately attacking Shen Qiao with even more vehemence. Shen Qiao said to Yan Wushi, I'll hold them here. Go get the jade cistanch. Even before he'd said so, Yan Wushi had already bent over and was pulling up multiple bunches of those white palm-shaped fruit, growing within the narrow fissure above the carnelian. They looked a little like aloe vera, and though they should have been white, the light from the carnelian cast them in a faint red glow. When they were snapped, a milky white liquid flowed out, accompanied by a subtle fragrance. Legend said that jade cistanch was incredibly precious, miraculous at healing wounds. Even the imperial palaces might not have any. But after plucking a couple, Yan Wushi didn't give the rest a single glance. Instead, he turned to look at the carnelian beneath the cliff before doing something entirely unexpected. He pulled out all the jade cistanch that had already been fruited and destroyed them, then threw them off the cliff. The cistanch quickly vanished amid the sea of red light. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the other end of the passage. Chen Gong's party had managed to rid themselves of the apes with great difficulty, only to encounter more human-faced spiders. After another brief struggle, the apes had caught up, and they were forced to dash onward while fighting. Now they'd arrived, believing they'd found the light at the end of the tunnel, but they were never imagining a reunion with old friends. Yeah, he's super diabolical. You'll find out about that in a minute. Taoist Master Shen? Chen Gong's tone was both astonished and doubtful. They'd thought that there was no way Shen Qiao could survive the apes' group assault, but not only had he not died, he'd arrived here faster than they had. Fun fact, red light doesn't destroy night vision. True. However, there was no time for guilty feelings or interrogation, for the apes had already caught up, and there were still two in the front. Chen Gong's appearance caused those two to switch targets. They instantly took everyone to be invaders, which actually helped remove some of the burden from Shen Qiao. Chen Gong's party silently bemoaned their misfortune. They'd thought that they'd finally be able to obtain the carnelian after all their hardships. They hadn't imagined that there was another fierce battle up ahead. The apes were unrelenting and ferocious. If they didn't eliminate them completely, they wouldn't even be able to leave, let alone get their hands on the carnelian. Everyone had no choice but to draw their weapons and tussle with the apes. However, there was one small stroke of fortune. The apes weren't indestructible. Having fought with Chen Gong and the men for so long, they were also getting fatigued. Soon, Shen Qiao and Muran Qin each sliced open an ape's throat, killing them. The apes had long gained a human-like disposition. Grieved by the death of their own, they were also a little afraid and tried to retreat. Only the ape leader flew into a rage, attacking them in an even greater frenzy. Despite its fury, the leader was already in disarray, and after fighting the apes for so long, everyone had slowly begun to grasp some tricks instead of merely trying to muscle through with force. The neck was the softest and weakest part of the ape. As long as one could find the chance to pierce it with their sword, even if the blow didn't decapitate the ape, it would still slice open its throat and kill it. Within half an hour, a fair number of apes had died by their blades. Seeing their victory imminent, Chen Gong slowly left the circle of battle and walked towards the cliff. The carnelian lay only 30 or so yards below the cliff. To those skilled in Qigong, the height was no trouble at all. Chen Gong had journeyed a great distance from Qi's capital just for this. He'd even almost lost his life along the way. Now that he could finally see his... oh my goodness, this paragraph. I'm going to start this paragraph over because I messed this paragraph up. The carnelian lay only 30 or so yards below the cliff. To those skilled in Qigong, the height was no trouble at all. Chen Gong had journeyed a great distance here from Qi's capital just for this, and he'd even almost lost his life along the way. Now that he could see his final goal right before his eyes, he couldn't help but grow excited. He composed himself, tossing aside all his useless emotions, then turned back to glance at Muran Qin and the others. Out of everyone who'd followed him here, there were only 3 people left, not counting Chen Gong himself. They were Muran Qin and his nephew Muran Shun, as well as a man named Sa Kunping. The 3 of them had been the best martial artists out of the bunch, but they were all still fighting the apes and barely able to keep up. Chen Gong lacked the patience to wait until they could take a look, so he jumped down along the cliff wall himself. There were no apes or spiders down below. It was all carnelian, sprouted in clusters of crystals. Their red glow wasn't blinding, nor did it remind him of blood. Instead, they actually gave off a faint sense of harmonious peace. Chen Gong couldn't contain his excitement. He reached out to touch them. The crystal surface was smooth and translucent, reflecting even the outline of his fingers. Only after a moment did his excited feelings slowly calm down. Chen Gong looked around himself. These naturally formed crystals were incomparably hard and couldn't be easily removed. To do so would probably require dozens, even hundreds of men chopping away at them with an axe. But Chen Gong had no intention of taking the carnelian with him. It was true that they were priceless, but that had never been his goal. He untied the Tai sword upon his back, then looked for a carnelian crystal with the sharpest edge. He pressed the sword to the carnelian, right where the hilt connected to the blade. With a quiet click, the hilt separated from the blade. Just like that, he'd broken a legendary sword that had been passed down the generations into 2. But an expression of joy came over Chen Gong's face. He threw the blade aside, then carefully removed a small piece of silk from a hollow within the hilt. The silk was crammed full of words. Chen Gong looked at it for a while, and the joy on his face became brighter and brighter. He simply stood among the carnelian as he began to carefully read. However, after a moment, his expression suddenly filled with alarm. He looked down to see the palm of his right hand had already turned a bruised purple without his notice, and it was slowly spreading up his arm. A prickling pain accompanied it as it traveled, an itchiness within the agony that made him want to scratch at it. And Chen Gong did, but it didn't stop the itchiness. He scratched until it bled, to no avail. Beneath the skin, it felt like thousands of insects were biting at him, painful and scratchy beyond enduring. His veins began to protrude, sprawling within in the direction of the blood flow, all while slowly spreading towards his wrist. Chen Gong didn't need someone to tell him to know he'd been poisoned. There was no time to be concerned about anything else. He climbed back up the cliff wall in a few leaps and returned to the original passage. At this time, Muronqin and Shen Qiao had managed to kill over half of the apes, forcing the leader to retreat, while Yan Wushi had somehow found a mechanism within the wall. A massive boulder came crashing down to seal off the passage, and everyone took the chance to back up. The boulder separated them from the apes, letting the entire group pause to catch their breaths. But Chen Gong was completely preoccupied with the fact that he'd been poisoned. He had no time to spare for the apes. Muronqin saw his terrified expression and quickly ran over to support him. "Quick! Hurry! Do you have any antidotes on you?" Muronqin's gaze landed on his palm, and he couldn't conceal his alarm. "My lord, this is—" The purplish-blue color had already begun to creep over his wrist. Chen Gong was practically roaring by now. "Antidote!" He'd taken quite a few at the bottom of the cliff, but they were all ineffective. Now he could only place all his hopes on Muronqin. But no antidote could cure everything. Anything Muronqin had on him, Chen Gong certainly also had. After swallowing down a great many pills to no avail, Chen Gong was already on the brink of despair. He didn't expect that, after staking everything on achieving his goal, he would lose his life over something like this. "Does Taoist Master Shen have a method to cure this poison?" he said hoarsely. If Shen Qiao were his final hope, his gaze on him was full of desperate anticipation. Shen Qiao didn't even have an idea of how he'd been poisoned in the first place. He went all this way just to break a sword. Yes, but the sword isn't what's important. You'll see. All he'd seen was Chen Gong jumping down the cliff, and next thing he knew, he'd returned poisoned. Is there something poisonous down there? It's the carnelian! The carnelian is incredibly toxic. Do you know how to save me? I heard that Xuandu Mountain was also peerless when it came to refining medicine, and you were the sect leader. You must know about all sorts of cures. If you can save me, I'll give you everything I have in return. Shen Qiao shook his head. I left in a hurry and came here under duress. There was no time for me to bring anything like an antidote. But Chen Gong only thought him unwilling. He fished out a piece of jade from his lapels and tossed it to Shen Qiao. In truth, back when you agreed to travel with us, I ordered someone to free that old man. By now, he must already be back home with his granddaughter. If you're still worried, once you get back, you can take this jade to Yunlai Inn within the capital and ask for him. I paid the innkeeper to hold the old man there temporarily. Even if he hasn't let him go, if you bring this piece of jade to the innkeeper, you can have him released. I know that you're an upright gentleman. You've saved my life many times before as well. I only have you come on this trip this time because I had no other choice. I never intended to hurt anyone. Please, for the sake of our old friendship, save me." He spoke incredibly quickly. One could imagine just how panicked he was. Shen Qiao said helplessly, I truly don't have an antidote. The moment he said this, Chen Gong's face turned the color of ash. He tried to expel the poison through circulating his true qi, but that only seemed to hasten its encroachment further. Seeing that the bluish color was already almost about to reach his elbow, Chen Gong gritted his teeth and then said to Muran Chin, "Quick! Cut off my arm!" But right at that moment, Yan Wushi suddenly spoke up from where he'd been silently hiding in the dark the entire time. "Why don't you ask me if I have any ideas?" So you remember when I said this was the last chapter of the night? Happy cliffhanger! Hey, at least it's only 2 days. You'll be able to find out very soon. But what a way to end it, huh? Right? Thank you, Annika. No, but we'll find out on Thursday if Yan Wushi has a cure or if he's just trolling Chen Gong. Okay. But I hope you all enjoyed, and anyone who's watching later enjoys as well. I will see you all Thursday to find out if Yan Wushi knows something, which he probably does, but he probably has another plot in the works, just like you said, Annika. All right. Good night, everyone. I will see you then. Oh, before I do, I, at least for the month of December, I'm not going to be doing fanfic recommendations. We'll see if I pick them up in the new year. It's just too much with all of the recordings. So we're going to stop it for a while. But we might pick it up later, maybe like once a week or something after the new year. But we'll see. Night!